So the PMI definition of project management, and remember, we want PMI's definitions because for the 4 hours of that test, we have got to know and understand and be able to pick the best answer.
Wait, the test is 4 hours?
Huh?
You said the test is 4 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
And so again, practice in the library in an uncomfortable, because if you're sitting in your house taking practice tests in a comfy chair with your headphones playing your music and the temperature is just exactly right and everything's good, that's not how the test will be. Assume the worst, that the temperature's wrong and the chair's uncomfortable, and that everything happens for the bad. Somebody's coughing like a 4-pack-a-day smoker, and people are coming and going and walking around, and you just assume the worst.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again. Where's the practice test? Do we have that?
Oh, you should have some practice test material. If not, look out on the internet and find some, especially aligned with version 6. But PMI gives you at least some practice test questions.
Okay.
I didn't see any practice test.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, you may not have gotten any, but Google PMI or PMBOK version 6 practice tests and see if you can find any out there.
Okay.
Again, so the PMI definition of project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. So that should have been in italics, and you guys should highlight or whatever maybe take a note. Regina, I was mentioning to Dawn that it's good to actually take written notes, even though you've got this all written, because there's something about that brain, arm, ear, eye activity that cements it in your head. Again, project management is accomplished through appropriate application and integration of the project management processes and knowledge areas, and enables organizations to execute projects effectively and efficiently. So the common definition is the art of creating the illusion that any outcome is the result of a series of predetermined, deliberate acts, when in fact it was dumb luck. So, in other words, good tennis players make tennis look easy, not because it's easy, but because they do it so well. So that's what we want you to be able to do, is do it well and make it look easy. So the PMI methodology has the 5 process groups: planning, initiating, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and closing. We have the 10 knowledge areas, and then we have within that 5 by 10 matrix, we have 49 processes, again, not evenly distributed like peanut butter. Some have a lot and some boxes are empty. Again, this spans industries, so in theory, any kind of project that you could think about, whether it would be going to the next solar system or emptying out my gutters, would be a project that this PMI method could be tailored to address. And it has standard documentations and processes and approaches, but it's all tailorable. So again, across the various industries, and you do your particular training or tailoring, and that's basically the skull in the loop knowledge that you put in as a project manager. So obviously the value of project management is that you have more success when your projects are well managed. So again, there are various ways to complete the project within the allocated time, within the cost, at the performance or specification level. Again, you need acceptance by the customer, sponsor, or user, usually hopefully with minimally agreed upon scope changes, again, without disturbing the main workflow of the organization, without changing the corporate culture, unless the project was intended to change the corporate culture. So again, unique efforts require innovative thinking and advanced planning. And basically what you want to do is you want to look at the situations, the environment, the legal regulations, and changes that require a unique approach, because any of those might be the jumping off point for your project. So the project manager obviously is where the buck stops in all projects. And so depending on your organization structure, the project manager should have mostly responsibility and accountability for the project, ability to apply lessons learned, gets to define the project roles and responsibilities, leads the project planning, performs tracking and communication status, adopts the management best practices, which are described in the PMBOK, manages to the priorities, performs risk and issue management, makes decisions, promotes client involvement, otherwise known as stakeholder involvement, encourages and support escalation, so problems that might go to the program or portfolio level. You've got to have a very well-defined change control system so that you're not making willy-nilly changes. So somebody's working from version 2 of the script and somebody else has version 8, and when they try to mate their two parts that should interconnect, they better interconnect. So they better have the right version. And then the project manager also mentors program managers. Now we'll talk about various different types of organizations that potentially limit the project manager's budget and schedule and personnel expertise. But in general, this is what PMI thinks that a project manager should do. So this is kind of the idealized project manager.
So they should be a leader.
Yes.
Yep.
And so again, the 6th version of the PMBOK emphasizes the agile and adaptive practices, and again, kind of draws back from the project manager as the gatekeeper or controller. So you want the PM to be responsible for monitoring and managing, and what we're looking at is risk, stakeholders, and communications, and not so much the waterfall driven, first we do this and then we do that and then we do the next thing kind of old-timey waterfall deal. So again, the project manager should have a balance of skills. So they should be technically oriented to some extent, obviously be a leader, Regina, as you said, and then they should have the strategic and business management perspective. So in other words, it's nice to have your nose to the grindstone and work really hard on your project, but you've got to look company-wide and see what the rest of the company's doing, because if you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour in a different direction than the rest of the company, I give the example of NBC or of General Electric, and General Electric has all kinds of big motors and pieces and parts and whatever, and they owned NBC. And the old Sesame Street, one of these things does not belong. NBC was running off at 1,000,000 miles an hour doing their NBC stuff, and all of a sudden General Electric went, we're not so interested in this, we're gonna fob them off to Comcast. Well, then all of a sudden all of the seniority and organizational responsibility, everything that all those NBC employees had went away, and they were sort of the new kids on the block at Comcast. So as a project manager, you've got to keep that insight. So how do you keep that insight? Well, for technical skills, the PMBOK guide provides a lot of that. For strategic and business management, again, it's sort of your sense of what's going on in the world. So you can't just be project focused. You've got to look at, if you're part of a program, the rest of the program, and if the company has an even bigger portfolio, you've got to have some awareness of that to make sure that the vision and the management and the strategic alignment are something that accommodate your project and projects like that in the future. And again, for your leadership, you've got to be able to motivate and guide teams, and you've got to have the soft skills. And the big they who say things about things, say that the soft skills are really the hardest to teach. So if you can get somebody who's good at soft skills, you can teach them project management, but it's really hard to do it the other way around. And since it's just us girls, I'll say that most of the project management literature, because I'm a nerd and I kind of read that stuff, says that really women make better managers because they have the communication skills, the facilitation skills, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking.
Have the emotional intelligence. I just studied that.
And yeah, and I mean, that's a huge thing, because, if somebody is just grousing into work every day, I mean, it could take men months to figure out that there's something up. But women, will kind of zoom right in on that and be like, oh, what's wrong? What can we do to help? How do we approach this person appropriately? So, and especially in these days of HIPAA and FERPA and everything else, you've got to be subtle about some something, and you can't just say, hey, what's wrong anymore. So certainly we don't want to have failure, but why do projects fail? And some of the top reasons for failure include badly written requirements, cost and schedule getting out of bounds, scope creep, and that's huge because even a project that's going very well, they'll say, well, why don't you just add this other thing to it? And again, we'll talk about the phones. Phones were great and mobile phones are even better, but it's like, let's just throw a camera on there, let's throw some texting, let's have access to the internet, and all of a sudden your scope has crept up, and what does an iPhone 10 cost? Like $1,000. So I wouldn't say that's a fail, but because they're selling bunches of them, but that sure is a lot of scope creep. Again, if your project sponsor isn't involved in the strategy and direction, sometimes they will lose interest or withdraw because all of a sudden it's not the same project that they started out as. Again, the project plan has to be kept up to the current to make sure that the project you're doing is the project that everybody thought you were doing. Again, you don't want to have a lot of changes of project management personnel because everybody tries to put their own mark on the project. And so if you're changing horses too often, it's often difficult for the working teams. And again, if people don't have clearly defined responsibilities and roles, sometimes two people are doing the same thing and then they've got to reconcile that, and it's a waste of time and effort. And sometimes things are falling through the cracks because nobody's doing them. Again, no clear definition of benefits, deliverables that will produce them, poor or no change control. Somebody just whispers in somebody else's ear, hey, what if we added another fan to that? What if we made this battery life 3 hours longer? Well, people have to think about power consumption, weight, what have you, say if you're looking at laptops. And then if you have inappropriate or insufficient skills to carry out the project. We want to talk about the hierarchy of projects. So at the lowest level, which is the second from the top square, the light lavender square, we've got project management is the centralized coordinated management of a program. Oh, that's program management. Okay, so projects are kind of in the middle. Projects in a program have common deliverable or capability. So projects have a loose association, are called a portfolio. So this is really in no particular order because you've got projects in the middle, and that's kind of the lowest level. Then you've got programs, the top lavender box, and that's coordination between projects so that you can share resources. Maybe each one needs a half of an electrical engineer. Well, you can't have half an electrical engineer, but you can certainly share one electrical engineer between two projects. Now, you've just got to make sure that both the projects are equally flexible or something, so somebody gets them Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week and Tuesday, Thursday the next week, and that they don't all need the exact same resource at the exact same time. And then the portfolio is the overview of the projects, the programs, the operational work, and any other components, and maybe those are interrelated and dependent and can be managed to the benefit of each other, but usually in the portfolio sense, usually they can't. And again, I go to General Electric and NBC where, motors and big kinds of things that they did were not exactly the same as a TV station. So program management is defined as the application of skills, tools, and techniques to a program to meet the program requirements and in order to obtain benefits and control not available by managing projects individually. And again, I go back to our half of an electrical engineer. So basically you can share resources. Say if you're doing some kind of testing in a lab, you probably don't need the lab 24/7, but anytime that the lab's not being used, it's basically not providing benefits. So if you can schedule that lab such that it gets as the best utilization possible, then you're managing the program effectively. So again, a program is a group of related projects, sub-programs, and program activities managed in a coordinated way. And therefore, you want to obtain benefits not available from managing them individually. So if you've got, say, some kind of simulator, if you have 3 different projects that are using the simulator for different reasons, you don't want them to have to build 3 different simulators if one simulator will do. So the features of program management are having some value added in managing them together. And again, I go to my space station program where obviously the propulsion system, the life support system, the guidance navigation systems are all different, but they obviously had to work together to keep the space station up in space and not falling on someone's head. So a project doesn't have to belong to a program, but a program always has to have projects. So, you know, think about that in terms of question answering and how that might work. And again, a program is designed to deliver strategic benefits to the organization. So again, the overarching organization, and the benefits could be tangible or intangible. So say something like resource sustainability could be an intangible goal or benefit of managing as a program. The project manager focuses on fulfilling the requirements of the project, and then you've got a different program manager who focuses on delivery of benefits to the organization. So managing in between the various different projects, you know, the overall overarching vision. So portfolio management is the centralized management of one or more portfolios to achieve strategic objectives. And again, a portfolio could be a number of projects. It could be projects and programs. It could be projects, programs, operations, and other things that are related to achieve the strategic business objectives. But that's kind of the whole, you know, like think of your stock portfolio where you might have stocks and bonds and money markets and savings and your real estate and, you know, various other high dollar, maybe jewelry or collectibles or what have you. And so that's your whole portfolio. And some things are related. So, you know, maybe your stocks and bonds are managed by the same person kind of as a program. But, you know, then there are other things that you have, you know, that are separate but contribute to your network. Did I skip you there?
What was that?
Okay, so the relationship between portfolios, projects, and programs. So portfolio is basically the thing at the top. And again, could be sub-portfolios, programs, and projects. And then the programs are kind of in the middle, and the programs could be programs or projects. And then the projects, you know, at the bottom, and then at the bottom you have projects, and then you also have potentially other work, and where the other work is potentially the ongoing operational work. So basically you've got the strategy, you've got the goals, and then you've got the other work. So a stakeholder, and again, we'll talk in depth about stakeholders at the very end, but that it has no bearing on their importance, because stakeholders are probably one of the most important groups or one of the most important concepts that we're going to talk about in the project. And a stakeholder, and see, we've got the little asterisk, so that means, you know, note this and memorize it, is an individual or group or organization who may be affected or perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project. So notice that perceived thing. So if you're, say, in the oil patch and you're doing fracking, somebody 2 miles away may consider themselves to be affected by your fracking. And so you've either got to prove to them that either they're A, not affected, or that B, that the fracking, you know, isn't going to have a negative effect on them. But, you know, when people have a perceived effect, sometimes they become a very vocal and potentially negative stakeholder, and you really don't want that. So, again, the project team, the project manager, sponsor, project management office, customer, etc., are all stakeholders of the project. So when you're reading questions, never discount the fact that the members of the project team are stakeholders, because obviously their job depends on the project continuing. But then there are a lot of people outside the project that are also stakeholders. They could be neighbors. So if you're putting up a pig farm or a fertilizer factory, you know, those neighbors aren't going to be positive stakeholders. They could be regulators. They could be people, you say people from the city who have to come out and give you permits. They all have some kind of stake in this project, whether they know it or not from the beginning, or whether they understand or benefit financially from that stakeholding.